Hello and welcome to the Health Oddity Podcast, episode 151. So last week we were joined by the fantastic Phil Maffetone. We had a lovely conversation with him, and we are back this week for episode 151 with another great guest joining us all the way from America. And it is actually Independence Day in America, isn't it? I think today.
Yeah, I promise I will not make any July 4th jokes. You know, you can make all the jokes you want about me being an ungrateful colonial. That's totally cool. I will take it because I'm the guest. I'm not gonna.
No, it's nice and early in the morning for you. So like you said, it's 8 a.m. You're just enjoying your coffee and just starting your day. No, that is fine. I just thought I would give it a mention for the for the American listeners and guests.
I love it.
One. Cool. So what we will do, Pete is with us, but he is someone's just been fixing his door, so he's gone off to deal with the person. He will be back soon, but I will check in with Mr. Paul Bassett. How are you doing, Paul, today?
I'm all right. I didn't realize it's July the 4th. I think typically British manner, I just didn't even recognize it as even a thing.
Of course.
Well, what was that about? Anyway, yeah, I'm all right. I'm just in the studio chilling out.
I was going to say, it looks like you're in your studio. You're sat on a sofa there. You're joining us there. And are they new apartments you've got behind you? It looks like that's sort of where all part of the new building.
Oh,
yeah.
Yeah. Well, they're about 6 or 7 years old, but I suppose they are pretty new. Yeah. I usually do this podcast in a deep squat, nice. But today I chose a nice sofa.
Absolutely. Gonna recline.
Or you're sat in your kitchen or whatever, aren't you? Sometimes.
Yeah, my bed sit. Yeah. Yeah. This is the mansion. This is the mansion. Yeah.
Okay. Pete is back. His door is now secure.
It is,
and he can sleep soundly at night. And
I've had Roger at my door, so to speak.
Okay.
I'll tell you what is amazing is skilled people. He's been here less than an hour, and it's something. I looked at it and I was like, if I take that door off, it's never going back on again. It's done in less than an hour. It's amazing.
Well, my next door neighbor had their door put in. I can tell you what, they weren't skilled because they started at about 3 p.m. and were still going till about 8 p.m. on a Friday night. They definitely weren't skilled sticking a door in. So if you get a good tradesman, it's a real.
That's fantastic. What a guy.
How are you, Pete?
No,
you all right?
I am now because I can use my front door. Because we haven't been able to use it properly. It's been threatening to fall off every time because I had to open it and use my strength to support it as we opened it from the bottom hinge. Because as soon as you let go of the top, it was just going to collapse. Which isn't great for security either, really. So
if you really wanted to throw robbers for a loop, you get like a DeLorean kind of door where it just like opens up from the top as opposed to the standard hinge.
Yeah,
that would probably be a pretty good security measure.
Yeah, that's a good idea. I might get him to do that because he's got to come back and do it properly. He's only just like kind of fixed it, so I might get him to do that. Yeah,
excellent. Well, it's a good job you live in a lovely, leafy, beautiful part of the country with low crime, isn't it?
Well, you say that, yeah. I mean, we've been burgled before as well, but yeah.
Oh dear.
So it's and I'm not that hard either, so it would be a nightmare if I was in. So I'm glad it's fixed.
That's why you got the dog, haven't you? Got like a vicious guard dog?
Oh well, yeah. I mean, yeah.
Killer spaniel.
Yeah, the killer spaniel who'd lick you to death.
There we go. Anyway, let us move on because we are on a time restriction today. So we are joined all the way from the USA, and I can't. It's Omaha, Nebraska, I think, isn't it? Is that where you are?
Very nice. It's not where I am right now. Right now, I'm in an undisclosed location in Wisconsin. I'm out visiting a friend of mine. But normally, yes, my home is in Omaha, Nebraska, and you pronounced it very admirably. I appreciate that.
By the way, I've seen that room before. I know which friend's house you're at.
That's right. It's not that undisclosed, is it?
Not really, especially when you said Wisconsin as well. So there you go.
Yeah, of course.
I'm missing it. Have we done a podcast from that room before?
Have you guys?
No, I recognize that room and I know who lives in Wisconsin, but I don't know if you've mentioned it while I wasn't on the call. But
no, not yet.
I know who it is. Yeah.
It's Pat. It's Pat Brinsborough. Yeah. Okay. Cool. Excellent. So we are joined by Aleks Salkin, currently in Wisconsin. And Aleks has been named or spoke about or referenced on the podcast a number of times over the last 151 episodes. And he's someone that I've been aware of for a long time. People within the kind of the kettlebell community, within the kind of calisthenics community, will possibly recognize Aleks, and it's great to have him on the podcast with us today. He has written a number of books. We will kind of talk about those as we go. We'll also talk about his training philosophy, his training background, and what he's up to now and what he's up to in the future. But it's great to be joined by Aleks. How are you doing today?
I am doing awesome, but I'll do better.
We did actually have quite a nice conversation before recording, which would have been quite a nice part of the podcast. We will not recreate the whole conversation, but talking about the latest Indiana Jones movie, which we've watched. We won't give any spoilers away, although this will be going out possibly towards the end of July. So most people probably will have seen it by then who were going to see it. But yeah, Aleks, I mean, I suppose to begin with, do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself, about your training, about how you got involved in this thing that you do now? I know you're also, you are on a lot of podcasts. I think you also have your own podcast. You have online programs. You train people online and in person. So yeah, let's just start hearing a bit about you, and we can kind of dip in with questions as we go, if that's okay.
Absolutely. Well, I got to say, for me, it's funny to think about it now because, we were just talking about Indiana Jones and all these other, heroes. And I think the impression you get, for instance, when you think about like Indiana Jones, at least if you've seen The Last Crusade, you can see that, ever since he was a kid, he was this, daring, adventurous type and so on and so forth. And I don't think there could be a better contrast to that than me, because I was very much the opposite. I was like clumsy and awkward and uncoordinated and weak and any other, non-favorable characteristic as a youngster. I was all of those things. And I was always very interested in physical activity and being physically fit. But, up until recently, I would say there wasn't like such a glut of great material out there. It was like there was like a very small amount, and there was a certain benefit to it. You're not as likely to program hop, and really more of the good programs were likely to rise to the top. This is pre-internet age, let's say, but that was very much me when I grew up. Is that I was unathletic. I was usually not picked last for team sports in school, but it was like third to last. It was kind of like, okay, we're getting to the bottom of the barrel. We'll take Aleks. He's not the worst athlete in class. He's just close to it. But I always did enjoy like physical activity. I just didn't like the competitive side of things. I didn't have a lot of, physical dominance in general, let's say. And, again, being that this was pre-internet, it was not necessarily very easy to get any good instruction. And a lot of the people who, and I think this is even the case now, a lot of the people who became instructors or coaches or whatever, these were people who were just kind of naturally good at the things that they ended up coaching. And I remember just very specifically, I still laugh about this with this friend of mine, is that when in college, even just to let you know how far this theme went, most of my life was kind of like this. We were lifting in a friend's basement, and we're rotating in on the bench press or something similar to that, and it was my turn to go in, so they were stripping off weight. I mean, I think that's how they got their conditioning in. It was like taking weight off the bar for me, to go bench or something like that. And, I did my thing. I think it was like a broomstick with a bagel on each end was what I was pressing. And my friend was like, so is it hard for you to like open doors, just to kind of razz me a little bit? I thought it was funny. It didn't hurt my feelings, but we get a laugh now because of just how much different it is. And the interesting story then for me is how I ended up getting to that point. And it was that I had just never really found anything that really spoke much to me. But in 2006, this friend of mine that, I would hang out with multiple times a week, we would go over to his apartment, and I was like 19 and or somewhere thereabouts. And we were both into martial arts. I think we'd always thought martial arts were very cool. And he had just discovered this movie called Ong Bak, the Thai warrior. Maybe you've heard it, yeah. With Tony Jaa, that is like the new Bruce Lee as we saw him, And of course, Bruce Lee, everybody respects Bruce Lee. So it was like, if you can get somebody who's even close to that level, it's just, you get this instant level of respect for him. So we would watch this movie and we just like marvel at how cool this guy was. And so he, Trevor, my friend's name, was like, we got to start learning Muay Thai. And I was like, that would be so cool. And it was purely theoretical at this point. Like in Omaha, Nebraska in 2006, that seemed like a very unlikely thing to have happened. Well, he did his research, and as it turned out, there was a 2-time world kickboxing champion in Omaha who was like a 4th degree black belt in Muay Thai and had a Muay Thai school. And in fact, he still does. His name is Mick Doyle, and he is every bit as tough as he sounds. He's an Irish immigrant. So that also, I think, just, ups his status as like, a tough as nails dude, because he immigrated to Omaha of all places, like when he was 18, I think. Fought all over the world. We thought initially, okay, well, this guy must have like a chain of gyms, and this is just one that he has in Omaha. So we set up an appointment to go and check out the gym. And lo and behold, who should be behind the counter but Mick himself? And we were like, starstruck because we saw him on the website and read his bio and everything like that. So he showed us around, and he said, if you guys want to come in later today and like do a trial class and see if you're interested, come on in. So we did, and I mean, it was physically one of the hardest things I'd ever done. Not only because they were hard classes, but because I was in no kind of shape to, do the stuff that he was teaching. And it took probably pretty close to a week to like recover and just let my muscles kind of calm down. And I talked to Trevor. I'm like, we have to sign up for this. This is awesome. So we signed up. Trevor ended up getting an injury, not related to Muay Thai. He was doing judo. They taught judo at my school for some reason, at my university. It was like an optional class. And he had hurt his shoulder, and so he had to drop out. But I kept going because I was really enjoying it. And I found like something that I felt like I could actually stick with, and that was actually I was actually making some improvements with. And Trevor was getting into bodybuilding at this time, and so he showed me the pretty standard American bodybuilding stuff, which you might be familiar with. It's like 6 different chest exercises and like 12 arm exercises, like an infinite number of ab drills. Nothing for the legs, of course. That's not really that important if you're kicking and doing stuff like that, because you're working the legs more than enough. And so I started doing that, and I was kind of starting to get the idea of, I wouldn't say strength training per se, but like bodybuilding as a part of like actually building up your body for something else, like doing just really standard routines. And then at some point along the line, I was taking Spanish classes at the university, and somebody that I had gone to high school with was in this class, and he was all of a sudden just like crazy about these things called kettlebells. And he was always talking about this like tough as nails dude named Pavel, who'd written these books about kettlebell training. And I had actually heard about kettlebells because there's a very oblique reference to them in a book by John Little called Bruce Lee, The Art of Expressing the Human Body. And so you've heard of it. And it's like on page 74 or something like that. It's just, again, there's no picture, no anything. I went back and re-looked it up recently because I wanted to verify that I was correct about this. The only thing, I think what it was is it was a reference to like this handle that you could attach to a dumbbell that you could use for, they specifically mention rows in particular. So I think it was something that was meant to make dumbbell rows a little bit more effective. And so I don't know what company sold it, but I know that Milo, prior to the Russian kettlebell revolution in the US, Milo, the strength company, used to sell something similar. And it was just like an add-on to a dumbbell, presumably to try to ape the movements that you would see in like the old 1930s and 1940s physical culture courses and what have you. So I was like, that sounds interesting. In fact, intriguing, but I mean, this seems like such a weird piece of equipment. I'm probably never going to even come across it. And so I really couldn't even picture what it looked like. And then one day he brought in not the book Enter the Kettlebell, but like a photocopy of the book, with Pavel, like doing the waiter's press with the kettlebell. And I was like, huh, I can't even think of what you would do with that. I don't know what this guy's even doing with this thing, but that's very interesting. And so one day, it was probably late March or early April of 2008. Drew, my friend who I took these classes with, was like, he called me up, because this is before people texted exclusively and people were terrified of, putting their face up to a phone and actually speaking. And he was like, hey, do you want to come over and try a kettlebell workout? And honestly, I had no interest in it, but for whatever reason, I said, sure. And I went over there and he started showing me these movements, and it was like nothing I'd ever seen before. And I was like enamored. I was like, I didn't even realize you could do movements where it was like your whole body was working rather than standing rigid and then moving one thing at a time. And I was like transfixed. And he's like, well, here, let me show you how to do some of these things. And we did what I have no doubt are the worst swings that any man has ever done. In fact, when I started to see a trainer a couple months later who was a certified kettlebell instructor, he told me, and I quote, my swings looked like drinking bird, that little thing that you put on your counter and it like pretends to drink out of the cup. And I wish he would have gotten a video, because it would have been great to see like a contrast, for how far I had come. But I was doing that. I was doing presses, Turkish get-ups, or I should say I was attempting to. I'm sure that it all looked god awful, but I loved it. And it was, I was like, I finally found some kind of weight training that I think really speaks to me and is something that seems really very useful. And, my martial arts prowess improved. I was never black belt material, let's say, but it was definitely better than it had been prior. And I was hooked. And, eventually what happened was I kept training in martial arts, but my focus more and more started to shift to the kettlebell, and then trying to figure out what I could do to get stronger and, build more explosive power for martial arts training, slowly but surely morphed into just a love for lifting by itself. And as time went on, I decided I was going to take the leap and get certified. And this was something that my coach, Scott Stevens, had kind of poked me to do for a while. He's like, you should think about getting certified. And, at the beginning, it was like, well, you have to do like 100 snatches in 5 minutes with a 24-kilo kettlebell. That just seems like a little bit beyond my ability. So I let these things kind of keep me away from it. But then the stronger I got and the closer I got to being able to do that, the more I was like, why couldn't I do it? Why not me? And so it was October of 2010 that I got certified as a kettlebell instructor, with the intent of just doing it as like a personal achievement. I had no real thought that I was ever actually going to train anybody, other than maybe a few friends who would come my way. But probably early 2011, I got an email from a lady who saw my profile on dragondoor.com, because back then I was involved with Dragon Door, and instructors had a profile so that people in the area could, track them down and train with them. And she asked, will you train me? And I said, sure. And again, it was just like saying yes to opportunities that I didn't realize were even coming my way, ended up really changing my trajectory in life. And so I found that I really liked teaching people, and I probably was better adept at doing that than what my previous line of work likely would have been, which would have been linguistics, which, very interesting, not a great way to, inspire people to improve their lives necessarily, but certainly a very interesting field. And from there, I said, I think this is the thing that I want to do. I want to teach people. I want to help people. And specifically, I want to help people who fell through the cracks, the people who were not, the people who were attracted by the gym culture, and the people who didn't just immediately click with something. I want them to be able to find something that they can click with. And if what they click with, let's say, is, marathon running or Pilates or something else, then I hope they'll find somebody who can help them there. But if it's strength that they want, and it's that physical confidence that they get from being able to maneuver an awkward weight through free space so that they can do that with other things in their life, or move their own body through free space with confidence and competence, then I want to be the guy who helps them. And so that was what really catapulted me into the field that I'm in today.
Fantastic. And so you did the RKC back in the day in kind of 2010. Also a big part of what you do from your kind of social media profiles and Instagram and the rest of it is the calisthenics stuff as well. And it kind of, so where did that come in? Was that something? Yeah. Talk to me about that. So initially it was the kettlebells. Then where did the calisthenics kind of merge with the kettlebells? In what capacity did that happen?
You know, I think I'd always had a respect for calisthenics because I do have some vague memories. For instance, when I was younger, for whatever reason, I could do clapping push-ups. Now, they probably weren't great, I'm sure, because I was like 8 or 9. But I remember being in gym class, and I was in Boy Scouts as a kid. And I'm not sure if in the UK, do they have like a Boy Scouts type of thing where you go in like nature and okay.
Yeah.
So you guys are familiar.
It was
ours. What's that?
Oh yeah, it was come up with over here. I live next to a windmill where the guy who came up with the whole scouting system used to live.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Very nice. I would figure it would
Can't
have been
remember his name.
woods.
Baden Powell, wasn't it? Baden Powell.
Yes,
or something?
Baden Powell.
Well, it is in the middle of the woods. It's in Wimbledon Common.
Oh, perfect. Okay, good.
Yeah.
That makes more sense because if it were like in a high rise, I'd be like, oh, come on, Baden, like
just in that one there. Just
exactly.
Yeah.
6 or 7 years ago, he moved into that one.
Started out with their kids abseiling out the top window. And then
exactly. That's how they have to get down. They have to climb a rope down to the ground floor, bringing the groceries back up. I'm sure is a real pain. But
talking of burglaries.
Yeah, exactly. Far less like he doesn't even have a door, by the way. He just bolted it shut. So, he doesn't have to worry so much about the burglary. So I remember for whatever reason, I think it's because, my dad knew some calisthenic stuff because he had it was just a part of his youth was being more physically active and stuff. And so he could do clapping push-ups, and I think he taught me how to do them. And then I remember being in gym class where this is why I bring up the Scouts, wearing my Scouts uniform because I was very proud to be, like a Boy Scout. And I was 8 or 9, just to make sure that everyone knows I was not like 15 years old at this point. And so the gym teacher was like, we're doing push-ups or something of that nature. And he's like, who can show us clapping push-ups? Aleks, do some clapping push-ups. And the whole class looked at me and I was like, this is the one cool thing I can do. So I did some clapping push-ups, and I was like, great. I got to be the star of the show for like a good 5-10 seconds, however long it took to complete the set. And so I think everybody just kind of understands that there's some value to calisthenics. Even if they don't see it as a strength feat, they see it as conditioning or something that's worth doing. And going back actually to John Little's book, I remember reading that Bruce Lee could do something like 50 one-arm pull-ups over the course of a training session. And I remember thinking, one-arm pull-up, that would be a pretty cool trick. I didn't realize, the kind of strength that went into it, but I remember thinking like, I had this vision in my head that I would go to my university's gym and I would, knock off some one-arm pull-ups and impress the people in the gym. I never really pursued it because it was something that, I just got distracted by other things, but calisthenics for strength and power and that sort of a thing was something that I'd always appreciated. But I found to be very challenging, especially once I got into kettlebell training and I could see that there was a difference between, let's say, bodybuilding for the sake of building muscle and strength training. Now, obviously, there is a connection. I don't want people to think I'm saying that there's not. But I remember, actually, it was in that first workout that I did with Drew, he showed me the Naked Warrior, which is not a dirty yoga pose for people who are not familiar. This was actually a book by Pavel that he wrote about 20 years ago on calisthenic strength for brute strength. And it's really focused around only 2 movements, the pistol squat and the one-arm push-up. And everybody's heard of one-arm push-ups, but I had never heard of pistol squats. And so Drew showed me the picture, and remarkably, I was able to do one pistol squat on my right leg. Every muscle in my leg seized up. It felt like it had suddenly, like Medusa had stared at my leg and like everything had turned to stone because I had never felt my leg work this hard. But I did manage 1 rep. And I was like, wow, this is really cool. This is obviously very hard. I don't need any extra weight and I'm really working pretty hard here. So Drew, being like the ultimate friend, honestly, he loaned me Enter the Kettlebell and the Naked Warrior and a kettlebell. So my first introduction into kettlebell training had a blend of calisthenics already mixed in because I had, I got the chance to read the Naked Warrior as well. And try as I might, one-arm push-ups just usually involve me feasting on a face full of dirt because it was like, I get like an inch or two, and all of a sudden I was like catapulted earthward. And so I was always really interested in it, and I would still do regular push-ups and leg raises and other abdominal type exercise. Periodically I would do some pull-ups, but and pistol squats. Those, again, I think because of my mobility and stability at the very least, I was able to do at least a few reps per leg within not a terribly long amount of time. But one arm push-ups really eluded me. And then I remember, for whatever reason, this was in like 2011. I just remember this very distinctly because it was like a real revelation. I was like, you know what? I just need to get the Naked Warrior DVD because there's something I'm not understanding about one arm push-ups, and I just really, really want to be able to do them. And sure enough, Pavel mentions in the DVD something that for what I'll never understand why he didn't mention this in the book, but he talks about the hollow position, and he explains the importance of getting hollow and how to get into the position. And I was like, I've never even heard of this, so I'm certainly not doing it. So he did that, and then he demonstrated a one-arm push-up. This must have been in the first 5 or 10 minutes of the DVD. So I paused the DVD, went to the middle of my bedroom, and I did a one-arm push-up. And it was like, I kid you not, it was like a veil was lifted from my eyes. And I was like, now I get it. It's not like I was, Neo becoming the one, and all of a sudden, I could see the code in the Matrix or anything like that. But I could see off in the distance this code in the Matrix. And I was like, now I understand the direction I need to go, and I understand the path. So I would say more than anything, when the veil was lifted, I could see the path that was revealed to me that I needed to follow. And it was that I needed to take a slightly different approach to how I trained the calisthenics moves versus kettlebell moves, and that there were body positioning things that were going to make it so that you could actually be successful, which you also have in kettlebell training. You have it in barbell training. You have it in a whole bunch of different things. But with calisthenics in particular, it's very unique. And so it was that achievement that immediately set me off into wanting to see just how far I could take the calisthenics side of the equation. And so I think the natural combination of modalities, I think there's some things that just work well together. Barbells and dumbbells, kettlebells and calisthenics. They really complement each other very, very well for a variety of reasons. We could speculate why. I think with the barbells and dumbbells, it's the idea of adjustableness, and how you can go up in small increments. They work very well together. With kettlebells and calisthenics, they're both fixed weights. And so there is something about that, their status as fixed weights, even though they're very different in terms of, the actual implement, that means that the programming can be very similar. Again, same with barbells and dumbbells. You can go up 2.5 to 5 pounds, or I guess it would be 1 kilo, 2 kilos at a time, that sort of a thing. And likewise with body weight and kettlebells, you can do very complementary workouts with the two of those things together. And so that was when I really started to work on figuring out how I could do that, not just for myself, but then also for my students, so that they could be getting even faster results more quickly and have a wider array of exercises they could do, rather than just kind of let's say coagulate them into just like this one small group of like fundamental exercises with kettlebells. You could also do a fundamental group of exercises with calisthenics. And then later on down the line, I discovered the value of natural human movements in the form of like the original strength resets, for instance. And that became like the trifecta that I use today. But yeah, that's how it started. It was kettlebells, calisthenics, and then finally the original strength resets in particular, and then natural human movement in general that formed the system that I use now.
I suppose that's why it's interesting to work with a coach, because most people are either not inclined or don't have the time to go on this kind of journey.
Yeah.
You've obviously, you've had a kind of spirit of exploration, and it's led you down a lot of paths, some dead ends and some that you've made a huge amount of progress on. I suppose there's no dead ends, but there's ones that have become more productive for you. And I suppose when you're working with your clients, you're trying to distill that down. I mean, how have you started distilling down this level of kind of, because it's quite easy to kind of say, oh, here's a million tools, here's a load of different paths. What are you finding essential for your clients? What are you finding the best route to start people off, and what progress looks like for them?
It's a great question, because one of the things that I think is a I don't want to say flaw, because I don't want to make it seem like I'm criticizing other people's methods, because I'm certainly not. I think that there are a lot of really, really great methods out there. But one thing that I do think that a lot of people have a tendency to miss is that as a trainer or as a fitness professional or really as anything, I mean, it could be the exact same thing if you own a business or what have you. Your chief job is to solve people's problems. And I think one of the things that happens pretty frequently, or this is something I see specifically in the world of physical training, is that a lot of trainers and fitness experts are trying to build a bridge from their system or their course or what have you to their putative audience. And what I'm trying to do is the reverse. I'm trying to identify the people that I think I can help, and I'm trying to build a bridge from their problems to some sort of a solution that I can provide. And so one of the things that I realized very quickly is that not every course or every program that I've put together is going to work for every person. So it makes more sense to try to find a way to solve their problems or identify at least one of their problems, and then look at how I can solve it based off the experience that I've had, for the last almost 13 years of training people. And you really nailed it on the head when you said that a lot of people really just can't go on this journey. And so most of the people who are attracted to the stuff that I do, at least from what I can tell, they are people who have some sort of a professional level job where they have to sit in an office, they're behind a computer most of the day. They're very interested in strength training, but they have a tendency to have a lot of the similar problems that other people come in with. And not to speak of injuries or anything in particular, but let's say movement related issues. So if you sit all day, you're going to have maybe a hunched over posture after a while. You're going to have maybe tight hips. Other things are not going to move the way that they're supposed to move. And so what I've attempted to do is combine movement with strength training, not as separate parts of the journey or as something sequential where it's like, okay, first you have to do this and then this and then this, but rather as something that's simultaneous. And so it's a part of your training to work on your movement in conjunction with any type of strength drill that you want to get good at, or any type of strength outcome that you want to achieve. So, for instance, this is one of the great things about the original strength resets is that for me, it has been so much easier to get people to move properly as well as enjoy the process of doing it, because, people, I don't know about you, but a lot of people don't really like sitting there and like, okay, I'm going to, open up my wrist. I'm going to do, like, they don't know what they're doing. Like, they don't necessarily understand the value of it. But if you get them on the ground and you have them rocking back and forth, they're like, oh, wow, yeah, I can feel like my hands kind of feel a little bit better now. I feel, like I can squat down deeper. I can do all sorts of different things. So my purpose in distilling things down is to look at what are the common problems that people have a tendency to face. And as best I can, try to address these common issues with anything that I put together. So if I have let's take like something like a course or a program that I've written, I try to be very clear about, who it would be for and who, like, do you need to have kettlebell experience? Is this something that you can just start from scratch? And then I look at what are the things that they're likely to encounter. So for instance, if they sit all the live long day, maybe I should include something in there that's going to help open up their chest a little bit. So if there's overhead pressing involved, they're not likely to hurt their shoulder, or if there's swinging involved, they're going to be able to get their glutes engaged. So that way they're not, swinging all with their knees or with their low back or something along those lines. And so distilling it down really comes down to figuring out what are the common problems that I would say probably 80% of the people who are attracted to what I do are going to face, and how do I include it in training in such a way, whether they're working with me personally or they're buying one of my courses or programs or challenges or something like that. How do I put it in there in such a way that it enhances the process of them training while also enhancing their overall movement, so that it feels like something that they can actually look forward to, and they can associate the correcting of their, let's say, movement problems with the correcting of their strength or fitness problems. And for me, that's been the most important part, is not adding, like Brett Jones, I know you mentioned having him on the show. he likes to talk about not adding fitness to dysfunction, which I think is something that Gray Cook, a very smart PT, has also talked about. And I really took that to heart many years ago, because I found myself in situations where I remember asking a PT once, like, yeah, I know that my right foot turns out like noticeably more than my left one when I squat. Should I just ignore that? And he was like, well, if you don't want to add fitness to dysfunction, as you had mentioned, previously, probably going to want to address that. So I realized that if it's good enough for the goose, it's good enough for the gander. But I had the discipline, let's say, or the adventurousness to want to try to figure that out and do the things that seem boring. But the reality is that not everybody, as you pointed out, is really going to want to do that. And so that in a nutshell is what I do. So I would say, to summarize, it's trying to build a bridge between the problems that the people who follow me tend to face, and then trying to find a way to add the problem solving of their movement issues with the problem solving of their strength and fitness goals, and making sure that that's part of the package deal makes it a lot easier to, number one, help them to achieve the goals that they're after, but then number two, be able to do that over the long term. So whether they stick with, doing my programs or they go off to somebody else's, my hope is that I've left them as a better and more movable person, so that they can apply some of these lessons regardless of whose programs they're doing.
So in terms, sorry, go on, Pete.
I think now what I was going to say, because I was going to ask a question, because I saw a post. So we had a guy called Tom Morrison on a few weeks ago. You've probably heard of him because he's everywhere.
He was on my podcast.
Oh, was he? All right,
Yeah.
Excellent. Yeah, I haven't listened to that. I'll have to listen to that one. Yeah, because you've had what's his name? What's the original strength guy's name? It's gone out of my head.
Tim Anderson.
Tim Anderson.
Tim Anderson, because he's been on here as well. We've had him on the podcast as well. But so Tom was saying on a post he put up the other day, because he posts a lot of content and everything. He said he's had people saying, "You're wrong about this. You're wrong about this. You're wrong about this. This is how blah 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 blah." And he's like, "Look, I've been to so many courses and so many certifications, and after a while, they're all saying the same thing. It's just from a different approach." He goes, "So this is my approach, and these are the people I help." Because he keeps, the simple mobility method is like his thing, isn't it? So keep it simple. Yeah. So that was the question. How, like, obviously you're identifying a problem and saying, right, mine is the solution for your specific problem. Someone else comes with another problem. You're like, it might not help you. There you go. So how, and then you keep people engaged in it. So how do you, I don't know, how do you get it across how simple it actually is in the beginning to get people in? Is that through one of your challenges? I've seen you do the 9-day program as well for like $30 or something that people complain about the price of, and you're like, it's on $9. Is it $9 or something like that? It's like, you find that down the back of the sofa.
Yeah, people, I'm fortunate actually. A lot of people don't really complain too much about the prices, for the things I charge. I think in part of it, it's because I'm trying to like magnetically attract the right people. And I want people who are excited to train. And so I also try to put together things that are going to be exciting. Like, so for just to give you an example, one of the things is, here's what I would say is that I think a lot of times people look at mobility and flexibility work and improved movement as being like the equivalent of eating like unseasoned cooked broccoli. Maybe not even cooked broccoli. Let's say like raw broccoli. It's like, okay, I know I should do it, but it doesn't appeal to me. I just want the steak. So for me, what I do is I include the broccoli and the steak and all the other fixins like within one thing when I'm not always, but this is one of my strategies, so that it's something that I tell them, if you are not doing, let's say the OS reset, so you're not doing these flexibility drills, you're not doing the program. So trust me, you need to do this. And, usually there's a little bit of friction at the beginning, I think, because people are like, I just want to get to the cool stuff. But when they start to see that they're doing these things together, because I might have something like, like a circuit, like A1, let's say you'll do dead bugs. And then A2, you're going to do hamstring curls or something like that. And then A3, you're going to do double kettlebell front squat. So all of a sudden, they're like, wow, my front squats are feeling a lot easier. They're feeling stronger. They're feeling, so now they're like, okay, so I don't know why the dead bugs are helping. I don't know why the hamstring curls are helping, but the thing that I really care about, getting, my front squat stronger, feels like it's happening much more easily. So all of a sudden they don't have to question it as much. And, and then in terms of other things, because one of the things that I do pretty commonly is I'll put together a challenge, which is designed to be done in conjunction with your regular training. So you don't have to put like your program off to the side. It would be something that you could either do, let's say, at the beginning of your training or as a finisher. But we'll give like my Dawn of the Dead Bug challenge as an example. As the name implies, it is, it's based around the dead bug. And I arranged it in a way that would be interesting for people to do, because it's like, you do a certain number of reps, or you're going to do them in a certain way. Here's the set and rep scheme. It's just a way that they've never really seen dead bugs being done before. And it's not meant, let's say, as just kind of like a brief warm up that you do, and then you're like, okay, now I'm done with it. It's for a very brief period of time. It's the focal point of at least, this routine. And again, it's a routine that they can add on to their current routine. So it's not an either or thing, because you can always keep working on improving your mobility and, filling in gaps while you're doing other programs. So it gives people permission to add something else onto their training, train for a little bit longer, but have fun with it. And then, yeah, very often people, we use Dawn of the Dead Bug in particular, just as an example, people realize that when they start filling in these gaps with movements that they previously thought of as just kind of like, things to get the engine started, they start to see some other pretty cool things. Like there's a guy in Singapore named Lewis who did Dawn of the Dead Bug. And at the end, he just had this hunch. He's like, I'm going to try a one-arm push-up. And he managed a one-arm push-up on both sides. Now, this doesn't mean that dead bugs help you do one-arm push-ups necessarily. But if you have gaps in your training, for me, the gap was when I learned a one-arm push-up was that I just didn't know how to do the hollow position. For Lewis in particular, the gap was he just didn't have the abdominal stability to be able to do it. And then after, a month of doing, some dead bugs every day, it became a lot easier. And so the buy-in becomes a lot better. And I think one of the issues, Tom does a really great job of this, because, I was just watching one of his videos yesterday. And in addition to being really, really funny, it was also very, very informative. And in addition to making the videos that he's doing very funny, he shows you, okay, well, you can do stuff in a way that is going to give you what you want, but it doesn't have to be this broccoli. It can be the main course before you move on to the next main course. You can always have seconds. You can have, a burger, which is, let's say, the mobility stuff that he teaches, and then you go and have some steak. There's no rule that says you can't do that. And I think a lot of times people want to compartmentalize their training as, well, this is mobility, this is good for you. It's a solemn duty that you must do for yourself. People don't like approaching their training like that. So like I said, I really like Tom's approach for that reason. And I think he and I are on the same wavelength in that regard. And that's always been kind of my focus, is trying to make it more interesting, more appealing, and something that people actually view as being an indelible part of their fitness.
I think that's when we spoke to him, and I can't remember, it might have been you, Pete, or Paul, asked him, what made you, or what was the thinking behind injecting so much humor and entertainment into it. And he said, well, most of the time this kind of mobility stretching stuff is just boring as hell, and people just are bored by it, and it's always very solemn and it's very serious and it's very, so I think that the humor is one approach to get the buy-in, but like you said, the approach of actually intertwining it with the stuff that people actually want to do. It's like little kids sometimes when they don't want to eat a certain vegetable, and you have to you chop the vegetable up nice and finely and you put it into the stew, and they don't almost know they're eating it, but it's kind of, you're putting it in by stealth, and it's kind of a similar way, I suppose, with the training, which is really good.
Absolutely. Yeah, it makes a huge difference, because adults are really no different, incidentally, the actual vegetable thing does work with grownups too. If people are like, and I don't really focus a ton on people's eating, just because it's not what I would consider one of my top, points of expertise. But that is what I used to tell a lot of my students. Like, look, if you don't like this particular vegetable, but it's good for you, just chop it up, put it in a salad, and you won't notice it, or put it in something else. But it's, I think, the same thing, like you pointed out, with mobility or movement quality and things like that. At first you might need to do that, But then eventually people like the taste of it because they realize that, oh, this taste is giving me exactly, what I wanted. So they don't mind taking bigger doses of it and spending more time focusing on it. I think a lot of people, they're just afraid. This has been what I've noticed is a huge fear with a lot of people, is that like any amount of time off or any amount of time focusing or on something that they're maybe not used to is going to like completely like tank their gains, and they're going to be like, oh, I'm going to be weak as a kitten. It's like, it doesn't work like that. Just trust me, try the stuff out. We'll make it palatable. Like Tom mentioned, make it something that's actually fun and entertaining. All of a sudden, it's just easier to keep them doing it. So that's exactly it. You're just chopping it up into something fine that they can't really taste, but then they can feel the effects of, and now they want to taste it. That makes all the difference in the world.
Like you say, as soon as they can associate those movements with the thing they really want to improve, whether that be their pull-ups or their one-arm press up or their kettlebell double front squat, if they can actually associate a kind of a cause and effect to doing it, then you get the buy-in, don't you? And it's just like you say, it's very often just that first stage. With your training yourself, Aleks, what does that look like now? I mean, is it still a blend of calisthenics and kettlebells, or is that kind of how you prefer to train yourself still to this day?
Absolutely. I have done forays into like barbell and dumbbell training, and I like it. I think it's a great way to train. The only thing that I didn't like was the lack of convenience, because it's like I had to, drive to a gym and then wait for equipment and all this other stuff. And I felt that it just took up too much time. A lot of people like it and it works great for them. And I think they should keep doing that, because that's exactly the sort of a thing that draws them in. They have the time, or they can make the time. They can, make it a part of their schedule. Oddly enough, it was 2020 through, I would say, midway through 2022. I started training at a gym, which is like the absolute worst time to have decided that you're going to start training at a gym. It was toward the end of 2019. I decided I wanted to do this program called the Amazing 12. I'm not sure if you've heard of it or not. This is Paul.
Yeah,
McElroy's
Paul McElroy. Yeah, so Paul, we've had Paul McElroy on a couple of times, and he actually coaches myself and he coaches Pete as well. So
great.
We know Paul very well. Yeah,
Paul's great.
I run the program.
Paul runs the Amazing 12 out of his studio as well. Yeah.
Oh, fantastic.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Yeah. It's awesome. I would say anybody who has the impetus to want to look as good as they possibly can, they should. And I'm a very vain person. Why not? I actually wanted to do it. I remember in 2011, 2012, I was seeing all of Paul's posts about these people that he was training. And there was a gal, Nicola, I think, who was doing like pistol squats with a 32 kilo kettlebell. And I was like, my God, like I can barely do that.
Was that Tankerbell or something she was called?
Yes,
Tankerbell. I think it was a 36 kilo bell.
Yeah.
And I was like, how the hell can anybody do that?
Yeah. She's a phenom. I remember being like enamored, and I would see some of the other posts of people who looked pretty nondescript for the most part. You're like, okay, this person's roughly my size, but they're pressing a 48 kilo kettlebell. That's amazing. And it was not like one or two videos like this. It was just like all the time. And I remember thinking like, I wonder if there's some way that I could like live in Dublin for like 3 months so that I could do this program. How could I even like make that happen? And it just seemed like such a pipe dream. And then I was very pleased to see that he had franchised it and turned it into this, this juggernaut that it is now. And my coach, I mentioned earlier, Scott Stevens, he runs the Amazing 12 in Omaha out of his studio. And it was like end of 2019. I was like, you know what? 2020 is going to be my year. Every year is my year, but 2020 is going to be especially my year. And I'm going to do the Amazing 12. And so I called Scott about it, and we talked it over, and I was like, okay, I'll write you a check and we'll get this thing done. And, of course, I probably don't need to tell you what happened in 2020. You guys were there. But amazingly enough, because Scott was teaching out of a small enough studio, the municipality that we're in closed down the big gyms. But they said, if you have like a studio and there are 10 people or fewer in any given room, who knows like what the rationale was. It's like, I was fine, but I was like, whatever, that's cool. I'm going to keep showing up. then you could continue. So I was able to do it like basically uninterrupted. And then I just kind of got into the habit, and I kept showing up, and I started doing something different, instead of once the 812 was over, I started doing something else. And I was training with barbells and dumbbells for some time, and I still did kettlebell and calisthenics work, but it was sort of on the back burner up until about, I would say, midway through last year. And then I was like, I really want to get back to my roots. I want to go back to primarily focusing on kettlebells and calisthenics. And so that is what I've been doing since then. And it feels great. It's like, so right now in particular, as of the time of this recording, I'm going through a period where I'm working on greasing the groove with push-ups and pull-ups, and particularly, like more challenging push-up variations and what have you. And it's in preparation for something that I'm going to write about, kind of the practicalities about greasing the groove, because there's been plenty of ink spilled about the generalities of it, but putting it into practice, I think for a lot of people, they need to see what that looks like, so they can see the base of the pyramid. They know the principles and strategies, but like the specific tactics is what I want to focus on. And so I thought, I got to be a guinea pig and do this myself before or anything else. So that's a big part of it. And again, that's obviously all calisthenics. And then a couple days a week, I also make sure I toss in some lower body stuff, so that way I can't credit my success with the pull-ups at the very least, but having twig legs, I got to make sure that I got the legs beefed up at least a little bit. But yes, it's primarily kettlebells, calisthenics, and movement. Still doing plenty of crawling, loaded carries. I've taken up I don't know if you guys ever saw this. I don't know if it ever hit the UK, but this was something that happened in the US in like the 80s, called heavy hands.
Yeah, well, Dan John talks about it quite a lot, doesn't he? With the walking with the weights and stuff. Yeah.
It's great, and I had originally heard about it through Marty Gallagher's book, Purposeful Primitive, and I thought, that sounds interesting. And my mom had some small weights that were heavy hands related, because they had that little thing on the outside that you could use, kind of like wedge your hand into. And I thought, I remember when I read it in Marty's book, I was like, that actually does sound like a good idea. And I just never really did it. And then, hearing Dan John talk about it more, I was like, you know what? Dan's always on top of these things. I'm going to give this a try. And it's great. It's a lot of fun. So I use that a couple of days a week for my we'll say more low intensity cardio, as it were. So just kind of power walking with the weights and stuff like that. And I bought the Heavy Hands book, one of the original ones, written by Dr. Leonard Schwartz. So that's the overall view. It's for the upper body stuff. It's mostly push-ups and pull-ups with some assistance work in there to keep my joints happy, as I find that too much of a good thing is still too much of a good thing. And then I do that for cardio. And then I've kind of started going back to my martial arts roots, and I've taken boxing lessons back at Mick Doyle's gym once again. So everything has sort of come around full circle. And only this time, now that I'm training at his gym, I'm not like some awkward geeky teenager. I am the dashing debonair 30-something that you see before.
I'm not laughing because you're not, by the way. But
Yeah.
I've got a question for you, and this is it's a selfish question in a way. And it's also not rubbishing barbells and dumbbells, or not saying kettlebells and that calisthenics are better or anything like that. But I was training for the SFL and a while ago. So I spent like 2 years on barbells and stuff like that, but it didn't do my joint. I'm not saying it didn't do my joints any favors. For me, it didn't really work well with my body, because I used to sit at a desk all day. I worked behind a desk for 15 years. Mm-hmm. And then when I started working with Paul, he had me doing double bell stuff as well, trying to get into the rack position and holding it in. But my lower back didn't like it. It didn't like the extension.
Yeah.
So I was just wondering what your experience was from moving from one to the other, and then coming back again. Did it change the way your body worked? Did it work well? I mean, you look like you've got great mobility, so maybe it didn't have much of an effect. But the reason why I'm asking this question, because there might be people listening who've tried I don't know, try to use barbells, and then they're like, no, I can't. I keep getting injured, so I can't lift weights. Or they've tried using kettlebells and say, I keep getting injured and I can't lift weights. But each modality has a different kind of benefit to it and a different drawbacks. Like a barbell is really stiff, so your joints have to move around the barbell, whereas with one kettlebell, you can move around underneath it as well if you need to and all of that. So it's just kind of your experience on that, basically.
Well, you know what? I'll tell you, my friend and retired master SFG, Mark Rifkin, was a world-class powerlifter back in the day. And he had a very good line. He said, the barbell always wins. You can always add more weight to the bar. Your body can't always handle the added weight. The thing with barbell and dumbbell training that I mentioned earlier that I think is really great and unique about it is that you can go up in small increments. And so you can make intensity, or, you know, what we would call, maybe we'll say like the proximity to a given rep max, such as a 1 rep max. You can be very precise with it. Like if you wanted to lift 87.5% of your 1 rep max, you could set that up on a barbell, on dumbbells. Really not the same with kettlebell training. You have to take a more volume-based approach to kind of, you know, for the most part, in order to make it really work for you in the long run. The thing with the barbell that I experienced was, number one, I did get injured. Actually, it was with the bench press specifically. I've gotten hurt deadlifting on a couple of occasions, and you know, and there are people who are like, "Oh, you just did it wrong." It's like, you know, there are an awful lot of people who just manage to do it wrong. Even
deadlifting's bad for you. It's bad for you, and you shouldn't do it. It's like, no.
It's like, so the thing is that I think with a barbell in particular, a lot of the old timers, I think, had a better approach to it, because they might have made barbell their main, you know, implement. And this would even be true with a lot of the American powerlifters in, let's say, the 60s, 70s, 80s. I read a very interesting book recently by a guy named Jamie Lewis, who's like a strength historian. He's got a great website called Plague of Strength. And it is every bit as crazy as it sounds, but it is an awesome website. And he's compiled a lot of information about old time training, modern training. He's really good at it. And he wrote a book about called The West Side Connection. It's about the early days of West Side Barbell. And this was pre-Louis Simmons. So this was back when Bill Peanuts West, that was his nickname, because he ate a lot of peanuts for protein, evidently. Like from Bill West to George Frenn in particular. George Frenn was like such a good lifter that the Soviets sent people to learn from him. So, you know, the Soviets have this reputation even now as being like, you know, the kings of sports science. But one of the things that I noticed about their training, from having read a lot about it over the years, is that they did a lot of assistance work. You know, even if they weren't, let's say, doing mobility work, like, you know, like what we would say. I think the purpose of mobility training and flexibility training is obviously to be able to control these ranges of motion that you need to get into to safely lift. But the other side of the equation that a lot of people overlook, and I see this in particular in, you know, the kettlebell world, is the assistance work. Meaning, like, how do you fill in the gaps that are left by, you know, the kettlebell or by body weight? And it's not because they're insufficient that they leave these gaps. It's just that's the nature of the game. So this is why it's important to have something complementary that, you know, can help you to stay nice and evened out. And so the thing with the barbell that I found is that I didn't, especially in my more recent forays with it, I didn't have a ton of issues with it, partially because I had good mobility, but also because I understood that I needed to fill in some of my gaps. And I think one of the issues that a lot of people have is that as they get stronger, let's say on the bench or the squat or deadlift or anything else, they if they're not focusing on filling in some of the gaps in their strength that really can't be adequately addressed by these movements or other barbell movements, your joints are gonna suffer as a result. For me, the issue that I had with the bench was it just really bothered my AC and SC joints. And probably not going to be the case for everybody necessarily, but there does seem to be something about the bench press that just almost everybody who does it seriously after a while is going to get hurt. I'm not saying nobody should bench press, but I think you should plan accordingly. And that, by the way, the same is true for other things. Like I think it's Keith Sneidman, who is a track and field coach and so on. I think he said you don't get in shape. You don't run to get in shape. You get in shape to run. And I think it's very similar, honestly, with barbell training. That you have to prepare yourself for barbell training if you want to be able to do it with, we'll say, mitigated risk of injury. You're never really going to eliminate the risk of injury. To some degree, it's also true with kettlebells and calisthenics, but I think that there is a wider margin for error with both of these, even at a higher levels, meaning, doing a lot of snatches. If you snatch a barbell and you miss it, if you're lucky, it goes behind you. If you're not lucky, you dislocate your elbow. I've seen it happen in Olympic lifting meets. It's not that, the lifter didn't know what he was doing. It's just that's one of the risks that you're not as likely to encounter with a kettlebell. So yeah, my experience has been that I think and this is where I think the mixing of just some old school, good old fashioned bodybuilding, as well as kettlebells and calisthenics, or barbells and dumbbells, it's a perfect mix. And I think then, of course, adding in mobility or the human movement side of things through stuff like the original strength resets and things like that makes it easier for you to have a process that you can use to get stronger and stronger and stronger over time with a mitigated risk of injury. And I apply that to kettlebells and calisthenics because I have noticed that people end up with similar issues. It takes a lot longer on average to get there, but it does happen. With barbells and dumbbells, I think it's absolutely essential. That's why I think, and a lot of people are not going to like me saying this, but that's why I think minimalist training, whatever it means to people, is not a great idea over the long run, unless you have a way of doing the minimalist training that's not going to, or that's less likely to push you into this mess. And the reason I say, however you define it, is because there are people I know who are very focused on minimalism, like my friend Pat. But his approach to it is such that you might be doing a minimal number of movements at any given time, but you're not locked in for, let's say, a year or 2 years of doing this before you move on. It's like you might do it for 3 or 4 weeks, and then you do something else that's minimalist where you're focusing on different movements. That's very different, because that allows you to get enough balance in your body where you're perhaps less likely to encounter some of the issues that other people encounter. But I think with a barbell, unless it's for sports purposes, where it's like, all I'm going to do is bench and deadlift, for my track and field stuff, very different, because you've got other things that you're doing and you're not trying to hit any records with, the bench and the deadlift, or any other movements that you're doing. I think it's very ill-advised. And I think that for people who are training recreationally, over the long run, you're going to want a wider array of exercises and movements in your training so that you can achieve some level of balance before you try to reach a peak of some sort. And a lot of people don't try to do that. They just try to go straight for the peak. And, they end up like a lot of the people who try to summit Everest. They die either on the way up or on the way down. Maybe they don't die in the case of the exercise, but, there's going to be some sort of an issue that they're going to run into.
Yeah. Oh, that's absolutely fantastic, Aleks. It's been that's really insightful. And I think we had Fabio on before, Fabio Zonin, a couple of times. Yeah. And he did a whole episode almost where he talked about the kettlebell bodyweight and the barbell and the kind of the pros and cons of each, and the way they mesh together. And I think the way you've just summed that up yourself for your own training and with your clients is really fantastic. Aleks, if people want to find out more about you, what's the best? I mean, everyone's on social media these days. I mentioned your social media earlier, but where do you tend to focus most of your content or most of your efforts at the moment?
Well, definitely my best top shelf grade A material always goes out on my daily email list. And, people can come and go as they please, for sure. But the best way, if you wanted to get on the list, one of the things that you could do is you could go to 9minutechallenge.com and get my 9-minute kettlebell and bodyweight challenge, which a lot of people have had a lot of very nice things to say. Let me know that it improved their military press, their squat, their overall sense of resilience and, put togetherness. And that will put you on my email list. And again, you can stay as long as you'd like. I really like to lean into the infotainment side of things, similar to Tom Morrison. I try to keep things lighthearted, fun, but make sure that people leave with some sort of new insight into their training. So 9minutechallenge.com would be the best place to go for that. I am on all the social media channels. Well, not all of them. I refuse to get TikTok. You know, I get spied on enough by like American companies. I don't want to add, other companies spying on me. So, you hear that, Zuckerberg? And Elon Musk. I know you guys are spying.
Oh, what, we're going to have they're having a fight, aren't they? They're doing a
I
BJJ,
can't wait.
UFC or something. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. And evidently,
Andrew Tate said he'll train Elon Musk as well or something. Or did I?
Well, I just saw today. I think I just saw GSP is training. It's
Yeah.
been training with Elon Musk with Lex Friedman as well. They're all together training. I saw a photo. Yeah.
Is this actually happening, or am I
Yeah.
just missing
Yeah.
it?
No, it's
you
actually happening.
didn't dream it.
Yeah. Yeah.
This is you are not hallucinating. This is a real thing that's happening. And even crazier, this is probably my favorite part. The Italian government evidently said, yeah, you can do it in the Coliseum if you want to. I just read this because Elon's like, let's do it in the Coliseum. Like, very like Bruce Lee and Chuck Norris sort of a thing,
Yeah.
And the Italian government was like, why not? Let's do it. Let's see what happens. So I look forward to it. I would gladly book a trip to Rome solely to see, these two guys duke it out. And I do like Elon. I think he's really funny. I mean, I like him on a level that I think, like I said, I think he's hilarious. He's got great trolling capabilities. Like I follow him on Twitter, and like people will complain about him, and he'll make some sort of a funny response to it or whatever. You got a good sense of humor. So I'm pulling for him specifically because he's like the troll master supreme, and I just think that's great. So
maybe he'll use a Neuralink, and he'll just have some part of his brain that suddenly downloads like martial arts. Like
it's gonna be like the Matrix. He's gonna be like no kung fu.
Plug it in.
Exactly.
Yeah. Plug it in. So Alex, you've also got a couple of books, haven't you? I know at least two, but and then you may have more. But what books have you got as well?
Well, last year I published the No BS Kettlebell and Bodyweight Kickstart program, which you can find on Amazon.com. I think everybody has heard of that site. And then just recently, I put out a book that dives deep into an element of kettlebell training that I've really never seen too many coaches focus on, except for in just kind of like the faintest of ways. And there's this concept in kettlebell training, for those of you who are not familiar, called taming the arc. And the arc is like this curved pattern that the kettlebell has to follow during a given ballistic movement. But unlike the hinge, which is the impetus for the ballistic portion of the movement, where it's basically the same whether you're doing a swing, clean, a high pull, or a snatch, the arc changes based on the movement that you're trying to achieve. And the hinge, we spend a good deal of time focusing on how to do that. First doing it slowly, then doing it quickly. There's no slowed down, smoothed out portion of the arc. And one of the things we talked earlier about the importance of problem solving in helping people to achieve their fitness goals. The biggest problem that I've seen over the years when it comes to these kettlebell ballistic drills is that the arc is like the off the beaten path for a lot of people. And so really athletic people don't really need all that much help, or people who, maybe have a good weightlifting background. I think it's something that they can kind of figure out a little bit more easily. But for people who are starting their fitness journey with kettlebells and calisthenics, and maybe are going from something that had nothing to do with strength training prior to that, whether it's yoga or running or, cardio type of exercise, it's a real conundrum for them to figure out how to tame the arc, because there's no corollary to learning the hinge, meaning doing it slowly, learning the movement and going on from there. So I wrote a book called, wait for it, Tamers of the Lost Ark, and it is now available on Amazon. I was very happy it hit #1 in both weight training and sports training when I released it. It's gotten some really nice reviews from people who have done it. And the whole concept behind it is not to teach you how to do the ballistics, but rather to teach you, once you get to the point where you're learning any of them, how that you can shorten the path, as it were. So that way you're not off the beaten path anymore. You can use a similar process that we use to teach the hinge to learn how to perform the arc and kind of take the guesswork out of it. So you're not going into it blind, as it were. You can actually feel your way through the movement. So Tamers of the Lost Ark. If you forget that, I don't know what to tell you. I think it's about as memorable a title as I could ever hope to come up with. But yes, you can get that on Amazon. It's on Kindle, and you can also get a paperback copy as well.
Fantastic. No, that's absolutely brilliant. So we'll put some of those links and things in the show notes. I'm
Cool.
sure when this comes out, that'll be great. And everyone, one quick thing before we finish.
Sure.
Your nickname, the Hebrew Hammer.
The Hebrew Hammer.
Where did that come from?
Well, it should come as no surprise that I'm Jewish, based off of the fact that I was given that particular nickname. By the way, I've tried to give other people similar nicknames before. Like, I have Muslim friends that I've called like the Muslim mallet, and it just doesn't. There's no cultural reference that people can really, like stick to. So it never sticks. It's like the al dente thing with the noodles on the wall. It just falls right off. But I try. But the Hebrew Hammer actually came because two different friends of mine decided to call me that independently of one another. So I remember one of them was Ari Harris, who oddly enough, his nickname was the Pharaoh. So he had a studio in New York, and he was called the Pharaoh. So it was like the Pharaoh and the Hebrew Hammer got along. I guess this whole Exodus from Egypt thing ended up, being bygones. So we let those be bygones. And then another friend of mine, also a New York trainer named Steve Holliner, called me that as well. And they knew each other, but they didn't like collaborate in coming up with that nickname. So it was just completely independent of one another. They both called me the Hebrew Hammer, and I was like, I think that's a pretty good nickname, so I'm just going to run with it. So
that's superb. Yeah, we had Steve Holliner on the website and on the podcast, sorry, and we both had I've got like a Boba Fett.
Oh yes,
we both came on with the because he's a bit of a geek as well, isn't he? So
yes, he loves the Marvel stuff. He had a podcast sometime, but I don't know if he still does it. But he also had a lot of stuff on Godzilla.
Yes, he loves Godzilla. He
used to teach in Japan pretty frequently, if I remember. I would be curious if he remembers that he gave me that nickname or not, because I know it just happened and then I ran with it, but I don't think we ever really discussed it. It was just like, but I remember it was him and Ari Harris who called me that, and I thought, well, I'm going to stick with it.
Excellent. Oh, well, it was an absolute pleasure getting to know you and speaking with you today, Aleks, and thanks so much for joining us on Independence Day in the morning. From the US, so thank you so much for that.
My pleasure.
In the next few weeks, guys, we have next week we've got Becca Roberts, the current UK strongest woman and world's strongest woman from 2021. She's joining us, and then the week after that we are joined by Dan John again, who's coming on for, I think it will be the sixth visit, I think, with Dan. So we've got some great guests coming up. So please do share, like, subscribe, leave a review if you're watching or listening on a platform that allows you to do so. Please give us a subscribe on YouTube, give us a follow on Instagram and Facebook. And if you'd like to join the Facebook group, just go into group, search Health Oddity, and click on join, and one of us will let you in. We will be back next week for episode 152. Thank you so much, Aleks. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you for having me on.
Cool. Thank you, Pete, as usual, and Paul. And we will all see you next week. Bye-bye.